Yeah, I've spent time in commercial brokerage, and one of the hurdles for industrial, it just took time, was understanding who the tenants are. It's one of those things where you never know. We have certain property types, and you kind of have a feel for it's going to be a local, plumber or an HVAC company or something. Or but then there's all these other kinds of tenants that, as a normal person, you wouldn't have any clue. Who's doing that. Whereas, like in residential, I think that's one of those things people can relate to because who's going to live in a home or in a duplex or everybody kind of has an idea, right?
You're listening to The Accredited Life, hosted by Peter Neal. Make sure to subscribe and enjoy the show.
All right, Jonathan, welcome to the show. How you feeling today?
I am doing great. Happy to be here. How are you, Peter?
I am doing very well, and also happy to be here. Happy to be talking to you. So, let's get right into it. So let's start with you introducing yourself, Jonathan. Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you here? All that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I started my working career as a special education teacher in a public school setting. And I thought that was going to be the trajectory of my life, just,
Mm.
putting in 30, 35 years of teaching, getting a pension, retiring. But I got married, and my wife and I, as we were starting our lives together, realized that a teaching salary was ultimately not going to get us where we wanted to go financially. And so we were finding that we really wanted financial freedom and geographical freedom, and a teaching salary just wasn't going to get us there. So, as I was still teaching, I started flipping single family homes,
Mm.
and I was using the proceeds of those to buy small multifamily properties. And
Cool.
so started growing that portfolio and thought I was going to build this empire of small multifamily properties.
Mm.
Got into it, realized that it was way more management than I was looking for. And so I, over the last few years, have been selling off my small multifamilies and have been transitioning into single tenant industrial properties. And so that
Nice.
is my primary focus is these kind of small industrial, which means under 20,000 square feet, small industrial properties leased to a single tenant. These
Mm.
are generally on triple net leases, long term, 5 or more years with quality tenants that have been there for a long time. So that's what I'm about today.
Nice. I love it. There's a lot to unpack there. It's a lot that I can relate to. My mom was a teacher for 35 plus years. Dealt with some of the with the struggles there, and yeah, just the job security and all that kind of stuff. I mean, being a teacher is just it's that's a tough life. Yeah, it's rewarding, I think, as all hell. But it's when it comes to financial freedom and independence and things like that, probably not the the best way to go, right? What did you like about it? Was there were you somebody that enjoyed the people you were working with, the students, all that kind of stuff? I mean, was it fulfilling in that sense or
Absolutely. I got into, I was involved in like Special Olympics as like a volunteer. I was not a participant in Special Olympics, but,
Mhm.
I volunteered for Special Olympics starting in high school and
Mm.
went to college, needed a degree. And so I was like, well, I really like working with those special ed kids. So why not pursue special education? So I mean, I've got a servant's heart. I love working with those kids and people that struggle. I've got a heart for that, and so it was really, really rewarding. I still like volunteering my time today, but my income now comes from real estate. So I no longer teach. I was able to quit teaching in 2019, pursue real estate full time at that point.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So what was that transition like? What was the evolution like? Were you, it sounds like you bought the first properties while you were still teaching.
Absolutely. So I started flipping houses, it was nights, weekends, summer breaks, Christmas break, spring break, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And so, bought a duplex that cash flowed, like $600 or something like that. And then found a fourplex, and that fourplex, cash flowed like $1,500. And so I think I got another fourplex after that. And so it was at that point where my rental income was really starting to approach my teaching income. And I was like, wow, I've only been doing this a couple years. It's like 2 years at that point.
Yeah.
And so, it was discussions with my wife and about, if we want to scale this, if we want to take this further, it's going to have to become full time. And so, do
Mm.
we have, do we like the trajectory that real estate is going to have for us, or do we like the trajectory that teaching is going to have for us? And so we went
I'm
the
sure
real
that was a
estate path. And
no-brainer.
so
Yeah.
it was,
To
you know,
some degree, right?
well, you give up a lot though. I mean, you give up. I mean, people listening
Yeah,
with
yeah,
W-2 jobs,
yeah, yeah, the
got
pension and
benefits.
all, yeah, mhm. That's the point.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
Health insurance and security,
yeah,
a W-2 paycheck every 2 weeks.
yeah.
Um, especially if you're listening with kids,
Mm,
that's hard to give up. It's hard to
sure.
take a chance, and, you're risking a lot when you go out there. At the time, I didn't have any kids, and so, we didn't have a lot to lose. We were, we'd flip, 2 or 3 houses a year, plus we had this rental income, and so my income quickly surpassed my teaching income. And so, we're pretty healthy people. So the insurance aspect didn't really scare us. And so it was a risk. But, that's 6 years ago now. And so we're very, very happy that we took that risk, but it was not an overnight decision.
Mm,
We did have some rental income um, to transition us before I quit completely. And so it's not like I went from full income to $0. It was
yeah.
gradual.
Where you have to flip to pay the bills and that kinda thing.
Right.
I love the flipping strategy to getting the down payment money for the rentals you were buying because on a teacher's salary, I mean, that would be very difficult to save up for the down payment and all, right? You didn't have kids, but still, it's you got all your other expenses, so that was a good strategy. What got you into this space in general? What made you think this way? Not everybody does it, what made you think about this?
I somehow got into bigger pockets, and
Okay.
real estate was long an interest of mine. Like, even back in middle school and high school, I remember being a kid and these new construction houses going up around me, and I'd wait till the end of the day when the workers left, and I'd go over that new
Sure.
construction house and walk through it and
Yeah.
just picture, oh, the bathroom's over here, the kitchen's over here, the bedroom, the living room,
Yeah.
and I just thought it was cool. And so, yeah, I mean, I always thought real estate was really cool. So it's like 2015, 2016, my wife and I started consuming Bigger Pockets content, and just got confident somehow. And we bought our first flip. I remember we were on a road trip, a spring break road trip to Big Sky, Montana, and we are listening to Bigger Pockets. And then, after the episode, we talked and we were like, you know what? I think we can flip a house. And, just before that, we had toured this house from another investor in town who he was selling it. His story was that he had too much inventory. I think this house was a headache for him. And
Mm,
so he sold it, and we were like, I think we can flip this house. And so we got back from this road trip, bought this house, and, we were scrappy at the time. So, like you said, I mean, as a teacher, I think I was making, my best year, $55,000 a year. So there wasn't really any money left over to go invest in real estate. And so we were super scrappy using credit card balance transfers and
mm,
0% purchase APRs. And then eventually we were able to get some money from friends and family, and we just like slowly scaled and grew and turned one property into another, and then this property into two, took out a HELOC here to buy
mm,
this property. And so early on we were just really, really scrappy. And I mean, looking back, we just wanted it really bad. We
sure.
wanted to be successful, and so we really tried to do anything we could to make it happen.
Yeah, on the construction side, what did you learn there? Were you doing that yourself? Were you a handy guy, or were you working with other people, or what'd that look like?
I was doing a lot myself. I was
Nice.
fairly handy. I've learned some skills, over the years, and so I wasn't afraid to go to YouTube University, and
You learn a
just
lot there, yeah.
yeah, learn. But then also understanding what my limitations were. So when it came to electric early on, better safe than sorry. Hire that electrician,
Sure.
hire that plumber. hire the drywaller. Drywaller is the kind of thing that you can do yourself, but it's probably going to look pretty bad when you're done.
Mhm.
And the drywaller can do it in half the amount of
I'm
time.
putting up with that at a property right now. You'd think it sounds simple, right? You know what I mean? But if you don't do it right, it causes problems down the road.
But yeah, but I was scrappy. I was willing to learn and do a lot of work myself, work long, long days. And so, yeah, so painting, flooring, tiling showers, tiling backsplash, installing cabinets, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
I did a lot of that myself.
So let me ask you this: there's so many things to. I'm sure the evolution to what you were doing then to getting to what you're doing now with the single tenant, triple net industrial. Do you think you could have done the single tenant, triple net industrial first, like right, while you were still working as a teacher, maybe, and done that on the side, or did things you feel like have to go work out the way they did to bring you to where you are today?
It's such an insightful question. I mean,
I was gonna say you're really thinking about it.
I am. I mean, it's such a good question. I mean, I'm a big believer that, all of our experiences go towards creating the people that we are today. So,
Mhm.
I mean, in a word, no. I don't think going back to 2017, could I have started investing in warehouses? Man, I wish I did. Cause I'd
Oh my
be a
god, they've been so white hot. Where are you located at? What
I'd be a whole lot wealthier than I am today. I live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I do
Okay,
not
okay,
invest where I live, though. I invest elsewhere.
okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think I kind of had to go through the pain of doing smaller deals, uh, learning the lessons on smaller deals and figuring out what I wanted for my
Mm,
life because,
nice, yeah,
in the kind of, on when you're consuming bigger pockets content or, on social media or whatever, basically no one's talking about industrial real estate. And so,
sure,
it's all apartments, it's all small multifamily, it's all scale up to a 25 unit and then a 50 and a 100 unit.
yeah,
And almost nobody's talking about industrial real estate. And so it would have been really, really difficult to learn the requisite skills
right,
needed. And there are so many more nuances to industrial
mm,
than there is to residential. And so, yeah, I think, I really needed to learn those lessons, learn how painful it is to manage residential stuff, learn what my family's desired lifestyle wanted, what we wanted it to be,
mm.
in order to go the route of net leases and having more passive investments.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think it makes a lot of sense, and always curious because it's like sometimes I think there's some cases where people. Yeah, I remember there was like a story I heard years ago where somebody I can never remember the story, but it always comes up in my mind with cases like this where it's like the guy wants to be a poet or something like that, and he travels to India and he does all these things, and he spends years there and he comes back and he realizes I could have been a poet all along, I didn't have to
Mm.
do all that. But in this case, it's not necessary. Like sometimes you need to feel the pain, and you need to do those things. And I love what you're saying about like the lifestyle aspect to it. You kind of had to learn what it is you wanted to do at your time and all that kind of stuff. So let me ask you this then: how did you, like you said, I'm curious to hear from you what you've brought with you from what you were doing with the single family side, the fix and flips or I'm sorry, and the multifamily, buy and holds and things like that. You know, what have you brought with you into the industrial world? And then what is it that you've needed to learn, and how did you educate yourself on that side too? Especially like you said, being that there isn't as much content geared towards that side of the business and all.
So, I mean, the fundamentals of industrial real estate is similar to residential, similar to retail, similar to office. Buy great real estate in a great location, with a supply demand imbalance, and buy low, buy at a great basis, add some value, and sell high. That is the basis of it. But getting there in residential versus industrial is very different. So, in the residential world, you're remodeling bathrooms, you're remodeling kitchens, you're putting down vinyl plank flooring. There might be some of that in industrial, but the real value in industrial comes from different places. So it comes from having a great tenant and having a great lease. You also want a quality property for sure. But if you've got a great tenant on a 5 or 7 or 10 year lease, that property is going to be really valuable. It's going to be a lot more valuable than having like an average mom and pop tenant on a 1 year lease or a month to month lease. And so learning that a lot of the value in non-residential assets is created like on paper by
Mm,
signing leases and getting signatures and extending leases,
mm,
increasing rent.
sure.
That is the crux of adding value to industrial real estate. And um, it is it's hard and it's complicated to learn, well, what is market rent for this property? Is this tenant going to extend? If this tenant moves out, how long will it take to refill this? How
Mm,
much demand is there for this type of asset? What characteristics of this property make it desirable by tenants, and what is it lacking that is going to make it harder to lease this property? And so those are questions that are not easily answered, that you learn by talking to experts
sure.
and getting a lot of experience, and sometimes getting lucky, sometimes getting unlucky. But you go through those experiences to learn. And the the profits are like exponential, or like you add a zero to the profits.
Mm,
On a residential deal, maybe a good residential deal, you're making 30 grand. Maybe, an equivalent industrial deal, you're making 300 grand by also adding value to it, and taking risk, but also adding value. And so, yeah, hopefully that answers it a
No,
little bit.
100%. Yeah, it does. And, I'm curious what led you to industrial and not like a retail triple net, something like that. Cause I feel like, industrial for me. I've spent time in commercial brokerage, and one of the hurdles for industrial was, and it just took time, was understanding who the tenants are. It's one of those things where you never know. And we have certain property types and you kind of have a feel for it's going to be a local, plumber or an HVAC company or something. But then there's all these other kinds of tenants that you, as a normal person, you wouldn't have any clue, who's doing that. Whereas like in residential, I think that's one of those things people can relate to, because who's going to live in a home or in a duplex, or everybody kind of has an idea, right? With retail, even if you might not realize it, but you're driving by it all the time. So chances are who's going to be in that little strip center versus the big one, and everything in between. So I'm curious to what led you to industrial. Was there like a catalyst for that, or was it just something that interests you? Was it just you just thought, I really like, nobody else is doing it, or not a lot of other people are doing it, so there's opportunity there, or what was the catalyst?
Yeah, so let me start the answer by saying I'm not here to advocate that industrial is better than anything else, that it's better than retail or better than office or multifamily. You can make money in any asset class. One thing that I really believe in is that in order to be successful, you need to choose something and go with it. And so
Sure.
that was one of the strategies with industrial. I want my first commercial property was an office building, and so
Wow.
I learned a ton of lessons on that. It was a small kind of low risk ish office building, but I thought it'd be cool to buy this vacant office building and lease
Mhm.
it up. I did. It worked out great. I learned a million lessons about commercial real estate on that deal, but I wanted to go towards industrial because of. Number one, the management piece, the low management piece. I live in a resort town in Colorado. The real estate prices here are just stupid, and the prices just don't make sense. I do not invest where I live. Maybe one day I can find a deal, but right now the prices just don't make sense. So
Mhm.
I'm investing from a distance, and so I wanted low management.
Mm.
I have always been a DIY manager. Even my small multifamily, managed it all myself. And So I wanted to continue to not have the management risk of relying on a third party manager to be in charge of leasing and collecting rent and checking in on tenants and that kind of thing. And so single tenant allows me to have no management risk. With these net leases, I have a direct communication with my tenants. They're responsible for taxes and insurance. They pay those things directly. They're responsible for everyday maintenance, changing light bulbs, cutting the grass, shoveling snow, all that kind of stuff. I don't hear anything about that.
Mm.
The only thing
Roof,
that
HVAC, all that as well?
so the only things that I'm responsible for in a typical net lease is roof structure, sometimes HVAC depending on the property. You can get I have one that's an absolute net lease where I have zero landlord responsibilities. The
Mhm.
tenant is responsible for roof, structure, parking lot, everything. So the first part was the management piece. The piece that kind of freaks me out about retail is the potential tenant improvement dollars that are
Mm,
required.
sure.
This is a big deterrent to office, also a big deterrent to retail. Just if a tenant asked you to build out a space, what those dollars could look like. It
Yeah.
just gets more and more complicated. And so industrial, there could be. I've not had to fill a industrial vacancy yet. All my properties I've bought with tenants in there. The tenants have stayed. So there will be a day one day that I have to fill a vacancy, but the tenants in industrial properties are pretty low maintenance.
Sure.
These are service-based businesses. They're hardworking, blue-collar people. They do not, need to work in the Taj Mahal. They're looking for, a functional space with heat, sometimes air, sometimes not, roll-up doors,
Mhm.
and, some yard space. That's what they're looking for, whereas retail and office, they're gonna want upgrades and, change the drop ceiling, and we need a kitchen build out, and I'm like, "Man, oh man, those
Mm.
dollars, seem
Sure. Adds
seem
up.
pretty steep." So, that's what attracted me to industrial. You can certainly make money in other asset classes. My chosen was industrial.
I love it. I love your, the reasoning behind it and all. It sounds like it was something thought out. You didn't just say, "I like how these buildings look," or you it's, something like that, so typically, your buildings, do they have an office piece to it then? Are they it's not flex space, it's just straight, like a warehouse, that kinda thing, or
It's generally flex. So there's a
Okay.
small office portion, there's some sort of bathroom, but the
Mhm.
majority of it is warehouse and yard space.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so talk to me about the buy box. What do you look for, and how do you find deals in that sense? I mean, so I'm assuming you have a criteria, some criteria, and then you're articulating that to brokers. Do you find you're looking for anything off market or as well, or what's that look like?
Yeah, my buy box in general, I'm looking for deals under $2 million, under 20,000 square feet, occupied with a tenant who's been established there for a long period of time, preferably a decade or more,
Nice.
and some value add component, meaning the lease is expiring,
Okay.
and it's below market rent rates for the area. And so a lot of these leases are below market right now because, if they were signed 5 or 7 years ago, um, rent rates have increased quite a bit over the last 5 to 7 years. And so by this time, by the end of the lease term, their rents are now below market. And so that could create opportunity for a buyer such as myself. So those are the kinds of deals that I'm looking for. Generally, purchasing on a day one between 8 and a 9 cap, and so combine that with value add potential by increasing rents and extending the lease. There's the value add.
Hmm.
Um, how do I find deals? I do have some relationships with brokers. Um, in general, I'm looking for deals on my own.
Okay.
I do some direct mail. I look at Crexy and LoopNet quite frequently. Those are websites where brokers go to post their deals.
Hmm.
And so I'll just kind of look for opportunities, call brokers, have conversations. And I mean, it's tough. These deals are not growing on trees. And so you do have
Sure.
to be scrappy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
ask a lot of questions, do lots of follow ups, and look for deals that have been on the market, hanging out for a couple months, and just
Mm.
call, check in, see if they're still available, have conversations. And I'm seeing more and more right now. Sellers are willing to take some discounts. That's kind of a newer development in the last, say, 3 to 4 months. That they'll throw out a list price. That's sometimes ridiculous, sometimes just a little high. But the type of deals that I'm looking for, it seems like sellers are not actually expecting to get that price that they're listing it at. And so they're kind of expecting some lower offers. And so I've been having a little bit of success over the last few months, getting some leads on deals by making some low offers. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see deals.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's nice. I mean, and my experience here locally is a lot of the commercial brokers don't. They tend to want dual agency more so than like residential will. Yeah, and so
Mhm.
you got to have they're always kind of they get a deal in the back pocket. They're looking to place it with somebody they know and don't want to necessarily put it on CoStar or LoopNet unless they kind of have to for whatever reason. What markets are you interested in, and what are some of the dynamics in the market space that you look for when you chose the markets that you're interested in? Being that you're investing out of, I don't know if it's out of state or if it's just not where you live necessarily, but let's talk about that.
I do own all my properties out of state. I own properties in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in Iowa, in Oklahoma City, and I'm open to 40 different states nationwide. There's a handful that I'm
Uh,
just not interested in for various reasons, but I'm open to 40 different states, and I can do that because of the low management
sure.
responsibility. So
Yeah.
I don't really have to worry about finding a property manager by, when you buy a fourplex in Topeka, Kansas or something.
Mhm.
I don't have that risk. Um, and then the second part of your question was what?
Well, what we were talking about, there's the states that you're looking at, and then what are the metrics that are driving,
Sure, sure.
what's exciting you in those areas?
Yeah. So, over 100,000 people in that market. Um, a growing population, a diverse workforce, and a supply demand imbalance of this asset class. And that's happening virtually everywhere because
Mhm.
these basically nobody is building these types of properties. It's not economically feasible to be building these types of properties. There's a better use. Instead of building single tenant, they'll build flex. And so a lot of businesses, they love to have their own building. They want single tenant. They want it just theirs. They don't want other businesses driving around their building. They like it fenced. They want some yard space. And so these properties are in demand. And so oftentimes when a tenant gets in there, they don't want to leave because there's nowhere else to go. And so I do talk with local brokers to find out what the vacancy rate is for this type of product. And it's sometimes hard to get exact, but generally, it's under 5%. I feel pretty good about that. If I do have a vacancy to fill at that rate, I'm going to feel pretty good about placing another tenant in there relatively quickly.
Yeah, and talk to me. Did you say typically the buildings are 20,000 square feet, or what was kind of the metrics of or the breakdown of the building size
Yep.
and how many bays and all that kind of stuff?
Generally under 20,000 square feet. These are not big Amazon warehouses that you
Mhm.
see on the side of the freeway. That's not what I'm buying. I am buying properties that are, often built in the 70s or 80s, occupied by a tenant that has likely been there since it was built or close to it. And there are bay doors. Sometimes, these are drive-in doors, sometimes drive-through doors, preferably a dock. But a lot of
Mhm.
times, my service-based tenants don't require a dock. But
Mm.
for future tenancy, it's often a good idea to have a dock. An office space that is preferably like less than 20% of the overall square
Mm.
footage. When you
Okay.
get over
Sure.
20%, people just don't need that much office space. They
Yeah.
want warehouse space, and so you want less office space. Generally, people can work with less office space. They just put desks a little closer together,
Mhm.
and they can work with a little less office space. And so right now, yard space is really important.
Mm,
Almost every tenant wants some sort of yard space to turn their trucks around, to park their trucks, to store materials, to store personal vehicles, whatever.
mhm.
And so those lots that are like sandwiched right next to each other, those are tougher because a lot of these service-based tenants need to store stuff, pipes and trailers and all kinds of stuff. And so having some yard space is also really valuable.
Anything, what do you like to see on, like, ceiling height? Do you have any kind of, an area, like, an amount you like to see or something maybe you wouldn't get involved in, or
Typically, my I like my doors to be at least 12 feet high, I think 14 feet high. You can park a semi truck in there.
Mm,
Um, Clear height is more important for distribution type facilities. You'll hear a lot about like for Target or Amazon or whatever. They're sometimes going up to 38 or 40 feet high now
yeah, yeah.
because they want to stack stuff as high as possible.
Yeah,
My
those
ser-
older buildings don't have that require, they weren't building them that way back in the day, right?
Yeah, and my service-based tenants, they're not stacking stuff
Mhm,
up to the ceiling. And so, generally, if the ceilings might be 14, 16 feet high, that's generally fine. If they can drive a forklift around and
mm,
and get stuff off a shelf, that's usually sufficient for them.
mm. It makes sense. So talk to me about the how you're structuring these deals. I mean, so is this a fund? I mean, are you just buying everything yourself? Are you working? How do you work with investors if you do? Curious to that side of your business.
So the first couple deals, uh, I'll say that I finance almost everything myself. I do take on some investors, some friends and family investors on a debt basis.
Okay.
And generally those are short term, like 12 months, 18 months. I started doing that when I was flipping houses and I could return their money, pay them 10% a month and return their money in 6 months. These commercial deals, things take a little longer. And
Mm,
so it could be 12 or 18 months. So I can sometimes pay in cash up front,
mm,
and that can often land me a deal,
okay.
if I'm going against financed offers, so people like
Hmm.
cash. So I can
Sure.
sometimes pay cash up front and then refinance later with bank debt, and then take that private money and do it all over again. But, I'm using the sale proceeds from my small multifamily to
Okay.
largely finance these myself, but everyone runs out of money eventually, and so
Sure.
I'm gonna be coming up on a an inflection point or transition time where I need to decide if I need to get serious about raising capital from outside sources, bringing on partners, or if I just want to continue to stay small because that's certainly an option. But there's lots of arguments in favor of going bigger and doing bigger deals and bringing more
Mhm.
people in. So as of now, it's mostly myself, but that could be changing.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about like how much due diligence do you do? Because this isn't just due diligence on the building and the numbers, but you also have to due diligence the business, right? So how do you do that due diligence? What do you look for there? And how much kind of conversation can you have necessarily with the businesses to see if, because like you said, the value to be added here is typically buying towards the end of their lease, you know what I mean? So that's the risk you run is maybe they're moving out, or, I mean, or maybe they're not financially doing well or something like that. So what kind of due diligence do you do there, and what's that look like?
So one of the biggest things that people want to know when underwriting a tenant is about their financials. The problem is these are private companies,
Yeah.
and most leases in this area do not require tenants to disclose financials. And so you might want to know their financials, but you have no right to their financials.
Yeah.
But usually, as part of my due diligence, I put in the LOI and the contract that I can have a conversation with the tenant. There's usually no pushback to that, and so
Hmm.
I try to have a conversation with the decision maker at the business. Sometimes it's the CEO, sometimes it's someone lower, but some decision maker that has good knowledge about what they're doing in the space. And so you can ask a lot of questions that give you some information and help you feel good or not so good about the tenant.
Mm.
You can ask things like, how many employees work out of this location? You can ask, what percentage of your overall revenue comes out of this location, for multi-location tenants, things like that. It gives you an idea about what kind of volume they're doing. Uh, how many clients do you serve out of this? Do you have any big contracts you're working on right now? How is this year looking for you? How'd you all do last year? How did last year compare to other years? And then in some cases, after establishing this rapport and we're kind of beating around the bush and talking about financials, sometimes they'll just offer up some financials. And, it may not be
Mhm.
in depth stuff, but I've had, under no obligation, I've had prospective tenants give me like a year end report or a last year's profit and loss statement. So you can at least see top line and bottom line revenues and get an idea of the size of the company. And then, along the the building, the structure itself, one of the most important things that you don't do in the residential world is a phase one environmental study. And
Mm.
so that's when you hire an environmental company to come in and just look for red flags. They tour the building, they look at the past records, past tenants, and look for any potential signs of environmental liabilities for you as a buyer. Because when you buy that building, you take on those environmental liabilities. And so if down the road you find that there was some spill of oil
Mm.
or some chemicals, you as the owner are responsible for that. And so you want to know on the front end if you have any liability there. And so that kind of lets you in on a little bit of the due diligence that you can do.
Yeah, that's great. So what's the financeability look like with a bank? I'm sure it's a lot easier once you've renegotiated the lease and, now you're looking at a 7 or 5, 10 year lease with extensions and things like that. What does it look like up front? When you're going to, if you're looking for financing up front, um, talk to me about that.
Yeah, these deals get financed with local community banks. And so relationships rule the world. And I'll be saying that till the day I die because financing relationships are absolutely crucial to your success in real estate. And you've got to nurture those relationships over time. And so, yeah, I mean, these are local community banks. They do have an appetite for these types of assets, but they also like me and they like lending to me. They know my track record and they trust me. And so that is probably the most important thing where you have a relationship with a banker, you get a deal, you can send him or her an email and say, "Hey, I've got this under contract. Here's the address. Here's my plan. Are you interested in lending on it?" And they can come back with a, "Yeah, sounds great," or "No, we're not really interested right now," or we have to learn more.
Hmm.
And so, my financing relationships are crucial, and so it is certainly helpful to have a long-term lease. So a
Sure.
5-year lease is great. A 10-year lease is even better.
Yeah.
But I've gotten lending on a vacant office building before, and that came from a relationship with a lender who I had done like 7 deals with previously.
Mm.
I've gotten loans on properties with expiring leases. There's quite a bit of risk there,
Sure.
potentially. But the lender believes in me and knows my track record and wants to continue the relationship. And so it is, certainly easier. And this is across any asset class. Having those relationships, nurturing those relationships with lenders will make your life as an investor much easier.
Hmm. What do you typically like to see from like increases built into the leases? I know you said you haven't had turnover yet, but it sounds like you've renegotiated existing leases
Yep.
and with the buildings.
Yep, 3% is industry standard. That's if they're at market. I've done more than 3% if I'm taking them from below market to market over time.
Hmm.
But assuming it's market, 3% annual increases is pretty standard.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, what are you excited about now when it comes to the future of the business there? I know you mentioned, you're kind of in an inflection point. Do you want to continue on the way you are? You maybe want to start raising some money and stuff like that. And we talked about the business itself and, kind of the demand for this type of product because it's not really something that industrial developers are building more of for various reasons. So, what excites you moving forward with the strategy and what you're doing?
I guess I just say that I think we're in a great buying opportunity right now. Commercial debt typically comes in 3, 5, 7, 10-year chunks. So if you got debt on a commercial property 5 or 7 years ago, that debt is now coming due. Your interest rate is going to be quite a bit different than it was when you were going in. And so those owners are going to have a decision to make. You're either going to be making less cash flow or potentially bringing capital to like doing a cash in refinance in order
Mm,
to refinance that debt, or they're going to sell. And
mhm,
so I think there's going to be some opportunity with these properties with people that maybe just don't have a choice. They just have to sell because their debt's maturing. Their their mortgage payment, if they can refinance, is going to jump to a point where they don't like it anymore. Or maybe they just have enough equity that it just makes sense to sell now, now that their debt's maturing. And so I think that if you know what you're looking for, I think that creates opportunity for people like you and me.
mm. Yeah, I like that. You do anything or dabble with like sale leasebacks? It seems like those smaller buildings, it's not uncommon that they're owned by the company that's operating out of them and all.
Sure. Yep. I'm working on a sale leaseback right now. It can be a really great strategy. There's a lot of holes that you can step in. So
Mm,
you've got to be really confident about the tenant and you've got to make
yeah,
sure that they are paying market rate and not above market rate because
sure.
a something to watch out for is some of these like a mom and pop tenant might say market rates $10 a foot. They might say, "Hey, I'll even pay $15 a foot to attract people to the property."
Mhm,
And that increases the sale price. And then
mm,
shortly after closing, they stop making their rent payments.
mm,
So, they collect their money at closing and then, leave the space. And so
yeah.
you have to watch out for that kind of stuff. But yep, sale leasebacks for established tenants that want to continue to operate long term at that location and want money to grow
Mhm.
and hire people and build their operations can be a great opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, when I think of that locally, those types of buildings, there's definitely always owner users that are looking to buy those. I mean, that own those, that kind of thing. So that's why I was curious if that was something that was on your kind of tool belt for potential deals, right?
Sure. Yep. It absolutely is. I'd be interested in more of a long-term sale leaseback, or if it's a sale leaseback for a year, I need to buy at a great basis.
Hmm. Nice. Well, this has been a great conversation and exciting topic that I is not spoken enough about. You know what I mean? So I really I enjoyed this, and anytime I'm talking about industrial or something different than multifamily is always a good day. So I appreciate the conversation, and for investors that want to learn more about you and what you're doing and follow your journey and all, how can they get involved? How can they get in touch with you?
Go to my website, jonathanhayek.co. All my links can be found there. You can learn more about my story. And then I also have a podcast focused on non residential commercial real estate. So I started it about 2.5 years ago to learn more about commercial real estate and share it with other people. So that's called The Source of Commercial Real Estate. And I'd love for you all to check that out.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we'll put the link in the show notes. And I had a feeling you did because you have a really good setup there and you sound really good. So I was gonna ask you, but you beat me to to it. So that's awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. Great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Peter.